Black woman slept on the plane until the captain asked, terrified, any fighter pilot on board? Aaliyah Carter had learned to sleep anywhere, on metal chairs at forward operating bases, on cargo floors between missions, and for the last 8 hours, she'd been curled in a window seat of Flight 817, headphones drowning out the turbulence and the chatter of strangers. She woke because a voice cut through the cabin, not the calm, practiced voice of a captain, but a raw, trembling plea. Any fighter pilot on board? Any military aviator, please identify yourself. The co-pilot's voice, Ethan Cole, cracked, and the flight shuddered as if trying to shrug off the question. Rain pounded the fuselage like fists. People stirred like animals, sensing a storm. Phones lit faces with frantic messages. Aaliyah blinked, the world narrowing to the single urgent sound. We need help, now. She saw him then, Marcus Davenport, a broad-shouldered businessman in the row ahead, already standing and shouting toward the cockpit. My brother flies private jets. I can help, he boomed, as if anyone in economy would fail to hear him. His wife clutched her designer purse, eyes darting away from those around them. Passengers whispered. Maybe it's just medical, someone said. A child screamed. A man in a baseball cap crossed himself. No one looked at Aaliyah as if she might be the answer. Ethan's voice came again, thinner. Captain Harris is seizing. We're losing instruments. I need military experience. Anyone with combat training. Aaliyah slid from her seat, fingers steady. Up close, she was unremarkable to most. Jeans, a plain jacket, hair tied back. To those who judged her like Marcus already had, she was an inconvenience. To anyone who'd actually been in a war zone, she was a storm the size of which you respected. She cleared her throat. Ethan, this is Aaliyah Carter, former Air Force F-22 pilot. I have experience in extreme weather ops and emergency recovery. Tell me our altitude and the readings. Her voice was low, but it steadied the cabin like a hand on a rail. The silence that followed felt like the gap before thunder. Long, charged, expectant. Marcus laughed, sharp and loud enough to be rude. Sure, anybody can say that. Where are your credentials? He barked. The room split into two camps. Those who needed hope and those who clung to the familiar arrogance of money. Aaliyah didn't argue. She began asking for data. Fuel state, electrical load, pressurization, heading drift. Ethan rattled off numbers. 39,000 feet, heading 275, airspeed 450 knots, winds inconsistent, lightning striking minutes ago. The plane bucked. Oxygen masks nudged from their housings with the force. She recited a checklist without glancing at paper. Stabilize AI with standby attitude. Isolate failed buses. Switch to backup IRS. Maintain Mach below 0.85. Prepare for controlled descent if pressurization fails. Her voice was cadence and precision. People listened. Marcus's face went from contempt to disbelief to something like hunger, as if he wanted to swallow the explanation whole. Anyone who memorizes a manual can rattle off numbers, Marcus sneered. I demand credentials. You can't just claim. Aaliyah stepped forward, not aggressive, just utterly certain. Mr. Davenport, I lost an F-18 to surface-to-air fire and recovered the crew while leading a formation back on instruments. She paused, watching his posture stiffen. I won't ask your credentials before you lecture a medic. Let me help. That statement was the first small crack in the armor of ridicule. Seconds later, the aircraft lurched into a drop that pinned passengers into their seats. A woman prayed aloud. A boy started sobbing. Over the intercom, Ethan's voice trembled. We can't see outside. Instruments flicker. Captain Harris is convulsing. Aaliyah moved toward the cockpit, and the aisle became theater. Eyes tracked her like moths to a flame. Some were incredulous, some were hungry for a hero. Marcus shoved past, chest out, voice rising. I'm a licensed pilot of private jets. I have experience in emergency landings. A flight attendant interposed like someone parting a tide. Sir, we need military experience specifically. Please return to your seat. Marcus scoffed. Passengers leaned in as if the argument was the only thing keeping them from the truth. Inside the cockpit, Aaliyah found Captain Harris slumped, foam at his mouth, monitors spiking wild red. Ethan's hands hovered over the controls as if he might fly by telepathy, but lacked the instruction manual in his head. Aaliyah's training took over. She jammed a pocket knife to free a jammed strap, hooked a pulse ox on a finger, assessed breathing, administered meds. She instructed a flight attendant to fetch from the emergency kit. The cabin's chatter dimmed until only the storm and the rhythm of her commands remained. Get me blood pressure, oxygen, check for arrhythmia. We have less than 20 minutes before we lose him to cardiac arrest if we don't stabilize, she said, and every syllable demanded action. Outside, lightning carved the sky into white knives. Ethan looked at her as if she'd pulled something out of a fairy tale and handed him a map. How do you know that med protocol? He whispered. We don't have a medic. Aaliyah's answer was simple. Combat rescue missions teach you triage under fire. She applied defibrillator pads as someone in the cabin, Dr. Elena Park, a neurosurgeon, rose and moved forward, calm, professional. Aaliyah and Dr. Park exchanged a look that explained the past in one glance. Not friends, not acquaintances, but two people who'd seen blood and urgency and had learned to respond. Marcus tried one last public show. This is dangerous. I demand they verify. Ethan cut him with a voice newly charged with belief. Shut up, please. Let them work. The plane tilting again felt like an accusation. Aaliyah keyed the radio. Emergency frequency 121.5. This is airliner 817, declaring a medical and systems emergency. Request vectors. Her hands flew over the panels with the casual violence of someone who'd done impossible things and made them routine. Seconds later, a voice came back, steel and static. This is Andrews Tower. Confirm the identity of the pilot requesting assistance. Aaliyah breathed. She wasn't trying to prove herself by name. She was doing it to save lives. Still, she slid a call sign into the transmission, a nickname she'd earned in another life. Spectre, on approach. Static hummed, and then the commanding reply. Spectre, confirm. This is Colonel Rodriguez Andrews. We have you. Redirecting military corridor. Ground team standing by. The cabin exhaled like a lung emptied of water. The revelation was a grenade in Marcus's hands. He dropped it. Faces turned to him now, not in sympathy, but in the dawning horror of having been wrong. You're military? He stammered, small for the first time. Aaliyah didn't gloat. She was doing what she'd always done. Make decisions and keep moving. But the storm was no ordinary squall. Within minutes, the radio crackled again. Spectre, we're detecting an anomalous system. This front is intensifying. Winds gusting to 180 kilometers per hour. Hail reported. Newark and Baltimore are diverting. The operator's voice trembled with official alarm. You're the only fixed-wing aircraft in the corridor. We can't guarantee runway availability. Marcus's bravado dissolved. The plane's lights flickered, then steadied. The emergency had become something far larger than they'd imagined. A meteorological trap. Aaliyah drew a line across the slimy map in her head. Routes, wind shear pockets, potential microbursts. She calculated fuel burn for alternate airfields, and estimated glide times in case engines faltered. "Ethan, we're not circling. We'll thread the eye and descend through controlled spiral to pierce the storm and punch out the other side," she said. Ethan, stared. The maneuver was textbook suicide for a bird that size, if done without military precision. But when the manual says impossible, it sometimes means you either die or rewrite the manual. "Sir, that's a fighter jet technique," Ethan protested. "We can't do that in a 747. "We can't sit here and wait for every runway to close," Aaliyah replied. "We fly when it's impossible." She began the calculations, and the plane responded to her like an instrument attached to a living mind. Dr. Park strapped herself in, monitoring vitals as the aircraft wrenched. Marcus, who'd been pacing, finally sat, the color gone from his face. Around him, passengers whispered, some praying, some recording. The plane's intercom vibrated with Aaliyah's steady voice now, authoritative and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Colonel Aaliyah Carter. I will be taking temporary command decisions with the assistance of the flight crew. Please remain calm and follow crew instructions." Her tone was not asking for trust. It required it. On the radio came a clipped transmission. "Spectre, this is General Maria Hayes, Pentagon. We are authorizing your corridor and diverting all compatible airspace. We have ground emergency crews on standby at Baltimore and Andrews. You are cleared for priority approach." The words were life rafts dropping from the sky. Marcus pressed his forehead to the window as if he could look his earlier arrogance away. He understood then that something in him had been poisonous. As they descended, the aircraft took on the feel of a beast sliding through ice. Hail clattered like castanets. Lightning lit the cabin in grotesque strobe. Aaliyah's hands were steady, despite every reasonable part of the world telling her to be afraid. She guided Ethan with soft commands, each one a note in a song he'd never known how to sing. Dr. Park kept a running commentary on the captain's vitals. "BP stabilizing, sinus rhythm returning," she whispered. "If we get him under controlled G-load, we can keep him alive until landing." The plane pierced the storm's teeth, and for a breath, 20 heartbeats, the sky opened like a wound. They were through the worst. Then a new voice cut across the radio. "Spectre, unexpected microburst at your 12-mile final. We're losing radar on your approach." The floor dropped out again. Someone screamed. The child's cry became a chorus. Every 30 seconds, the story delivered another shock. A new piece of danger. That drumbeat of suspense kept everyone suspended on the edge, some begging, some holding their breath. Marcus watched Aaliyah, and the adrenaline in his veins curdled to humility. He'd judged competence by collars and color and dollars. Now he watched a woman of color wielding calm like armor. Aaliyah didn't notice him. She had other equations to solve. They lined up for an emergency approach to Baltimore International, the only runway being kept open by a flurry of military and civilian coordination. The control tower painted vectors that looked more like prayer than guidance. "We have visual. You are greenlit," came the voice. "Stand by for final." The air filled with the metallic scent of burnt ozone. The plane descended in a spiral designed to bleed energy while keeping structural stress intolerance. Passengers felt it in their teeth, the G-load. People gripped armrests until knuckles whitened. Ethan's hand trembled, but he no longer looked like a man about to crash. He looked like a man learning to fly, with someone who'd taught him that rules are tools, not prison bars. At last, the wheels kissed the runway like a promise kept. The applause that rose then was stunned and ragged, not extravagant, but grateful, as if the cabin had just been hauled from the edges of an abyss. Fire trucks sprayed arcs of water in salute. EMS surged aboard. Captain Harris was transferred under Dr. Park's watchful care. Aaliyah stepped down the cockpit ladder into a world that would never quite look the same to some people on that flight. Marcus reached for her hand, words failing him into a choked, "Thank you." She accepted the handshake without triumph. "We saved a plane," she said simply. That's what mattered. Later, cameras would swarm. Reporters would want the narrative tidy. Hero, villain, rich man humbled. Marcus would give a statement that tried to be contrite. Ethan would tell how he'd almost frozen and then flown. Dr. Park would be interviewed about triage. And somewhere between the official bulletins and the evening news, the quieter truth would sit. That competence doesn't look like a suit, and courage doesn't announce itself in the way people expect. Aaliyah would disappear into the shadows of the airport with a duffel slung over her shoulder. A woman who'd slept and woken and pulled dozens of strangers through a storm because that's what she did. But for those who'd watched her work, for those who'd clung to the overhead bins and prayed, a lesson had been grown by fear and forged by survival. If you like this, subscribe, but more importantly, remember the moment when someone you thought you understood surprised you and saved your life. Judge less, listen more, because the next time the sky breaks, help might wear jeans and a ponytail.